What's going on, growers? It's James Prigioni coming to you live from Jersey. Now's the time of year we're starting our seeds. And if you want to know how to start your seeds, this is the video for you. Let's go. In my opinion, the first and most important aspect to starting your own seeds indoors or in a greenhouse is timing. You don't want to start your seeds too early and have sick, root-bound plants when you have to transplant them. I bet you're wondering, how do I know when to start though, and in my specific location? My advice to you, if it's your first year and you're a new gardener, is to hop online. There's a nice website like the Old Farmer's Almanac. You can put your zip code in, it'll give you your last expected frost date. After you found this date, you'll use this to guide you specifically on when you start your seeds indoors and in the greenhouse. It's important to take into account that different kinds of plants take different amounts of time and temperatures in order to germinate. So this means you're going to have to find out the specific requirements for the kind of plant that you're going to be growing. For instance, if you want to grow tomatoes, typically they're said to plant indoors about 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost date. So if your last frost date, like mine, is around April 12th, all you need to do is count back 6 to 8 weeks from that and plant your seeds. What you need to realize though is this is just an estimated frost date. The best way to know the exact time to plant in your specific location is to keep your own journal. Every year, write down anything important that you did and really write down the day that you planted your seeds. This will be such valuable information for you in the future. The timing of my plantings are now guided by my journal. That gives me specific information for my specific location. Timing, that's number one, so important. Number two though, is location and environment. I see it over and over again, especially on Facebook, with gardeners, growers, starting seeds in locations that are just not conducive to growing. They have tall, leggy plants with small leaves that just lets me know and lets everyone kind of know that the location just isn't right. The environment isn't right. There are a few main issues that I think they're running into, and they are lack of light, lack of proper airflow, not the correct temperature, and also usually too much moisture. In my opinion, without a doubt, these are the most typical issues that I see. But these issues can be resolved easily. We just need to know where they're coming from. When starting our seeds indoors, we need to realize that we are now nature. We have to mimic what nature does if we want big, healthy plants to transplant out. So we need to mimic nature in regards to airflow, temperature, heat, humidity. So I'm gonna start by showing you guys the potting mix that I use. This is Happy Frog. I'll talk about it a little more as we get into the video. And also this right here is black leaf mulch. I put this at the bottom of my cups, the bottom of my starts. And what this is just decayed organic matter. It's just leaves that have just been composted down. So basically just all humus and perfect for growing and starting. The only problem with this is when it dries, it clumps up a little bit, so it's hard for the seeds to sprout out. When you're starting your seeds, you want something light, fluffy, to make a nice, easy area for the seeds to just pop through. That's why at the top of my cups, like I said, I use this Happy Frog soil. There's a reason I specifically use this Happy Frog soil, and it's kind of a thread that runs through my whole gardening process, and that is the mycorrhizal fungi. So this soil contains mycorrhizal fungi, and my garden, if you look out there, it's covered all in wood chips, which is the perfect environment for the mycorrhizal fungi to thrive. So in the garden, we've got all that mycorrhizal fungi, and I start with it here too. So again, it's a thread that runs all the way through, all natural, and this really helps with the uptake of moisture and nutrients. I've got some videos on it you guys can check out. But you saw that I poured it first into here because this is just a little too dry. As you can see, this stuff is just too dry to plant seeds in. And before I plant, I want to make sure I wet it down. This way I can get the right moisture content. So I want to first wet it down and get the whole thing saturated, because if I plant my seeds, then try to get it wet, there's going to be some patches that aren't all completely saturated. And you don't want this really to be soaking soggy wet. I'll show you exactly how wet you want it. So I'm just spraying it down and continuing the mix. As you can see, I'm not wearing any gloves because I don't have to film today, so I'm making sure I can take full advantage of getting my hands dirty. So right here, this is the moisture content we want. It's not soggy, but it's wet. If we squeeze it really hard, a little water comes out, but again, it's not really soggy. That's just how we want it for starting seeds. So now I'm going to do the same thing with the black leaf mulch. We want the right moisture content again to start. And make sure you guys smash that like button if you guys like the film work that's going on. And the fact that I get my hands dirty, I got my brother filming, so show your support. And if you really enjoy the different angles and stuff we're bringing to you. Typically this stuff is drier than it is, but I'm at the bottom of the barrel, and as you know, gravity works and water goes down with gravity. So this stuff's actually nice and wet already. It possibly could be a little too wet, but that's not too big of an issue, because there's one thing I always make sure is when I'm starting my seeds, you guys have probably seen I start them in these cups, but at the bottom of these cups I have holes cut for drainage and airflow. This is so important. Without this drainage, you're going to run into a lot of problems. So when I first bought these cups, I cut all these holes in specifically with a razor, and this is going to be either the third or fourth year I'm going to be using them. When I start in these cups, I start my tomatoes, I plant into here, and then I let them grow. From there I go right into the ground. This way I don't have to continue transplanting multiple times and mess with the roots too much. That's something you don't want to do. And again, this drainage is so key, because if you have water sitting at the bottom of a cup with no drainage, that water isn't going to have any air, any oxygen, and it's going to go what we call anaerobic. And that's not good. That's where you run into problems, that's where you get root rot, and that's where you get that bad foul smell. Now that we went through some of the specifics with the soil and the light, in here I don't have much of an issue with light because I'm in a greenhouse. There's plenty of light in here. But you guys saw earlier, I had those cups all sitting outside with fresh planted things. So a lot of times when there's a nice sunny day out and the fresh seedlings are young, I'll put them right outside to keep them short and stocky. Because if you don't want leggy plants, you want a location that has plenty of sunlight, but also is kind of cool when the seeds first start. We'll get into that more as we continue planting. First, I'm going to grab these trays, and these trays I love using. I can fit up to 12 cups on here, and that's what I do. With these trays, it makes it really easy to move locations. I can stack them before they get planted, and it just makes more of like a easier system for me. If you're in a location where you can't get enough light in a greenhouse or something, I suggest using something like T5 lighting. Those work well. But I'm going to start by, we're growing tomatoes here and everything's a little different. So since I'm growing tomatoes, I'm going to start with putting some black leaf mulch in, but I'm only going to put it in about a third of the way up the cup. That's going to be at the bottom, maybe a little more than a third of the way up the cup. So I'm going to do that with all these cups. And then after I get filled about a third of the way up, I'm going to come through with my Happy Frog soil. And again, I don't want to use this black leaf mulch to pot my seeds, because as it dries, it clumps up and gets thick and gets heavy, so it's hard for the seeds to pop through. At the top layer, I'll use this Happy Frog soil, which is light and fluffy. And it's kind of expensive. That's why I just use it at the top layer to get my seeds popping. When you plant tomatoes, you typically plant them about a 1/4 inch deep. That's what's suggested, so you don't really need a lot of that good quality soil at the top. So I've got all these filled. Now I'm going to talk about why I didn't fill them up to the top all the way. Again, I said I'm planting tomatoes here, and tomatoes actually can root from their stem because they're a vine. So I'll plant the tomato seed right here. It'll sprout up to about there, and then as it gets taller, if I want, I'll be able to backfill some of the soil. If it does get leggy for one reason or another, I can backfill the soil there. So that gives me that extra area of growth for backfill and extra area for rooting. Another thing to take note is when you're planting these seeds, a couple days before, you want to put the soil in an area where it's going to get kind of room temperature, kind of warm. You don't want to be planting, your seeds in cold soil that's been sitting out in the, snow or something for a while. Now that we've got these all filled with soil, we've got our hands plenty dirty, we can start to get ready to plant the seeds. I'm going to use a pen. I like to use that to get my little hole made. But first I'm going to go through and pat the soil down very lightly with my fingers, just to fill in any of the gaps. I'm not pushing the soil down, I'm just filling in any of the airspace. So as I use this pen to make my hole, you can see the moisture content is just right. That's just how we want it. I'm making these holes just at a 1/4 inch deep. Then I'm going to put the seeds in and push the soil right over top. Today I'm going to be planting a soldaki tomato. This is one I've grown in the past that you've probably seen me grow, and it's one of my favorites. For tomatoes, going back to location and environment, if you have a temperature for their germination between 75 and 85 degrees, typically your seeds are only going to take about a week to sprout. But if your temperatures are around 60 degrees, your sprouting is going to take up to 2 weeks. So I've got a heating mat and a little system set up so I can get my seeds sprouted quicker and also at a higher germination rate. So now I'm going to go through, I've got all my holes made, and I personally just like to stick 2 in each one Even though they usually all come up, I like to have 2 in there just so I can pick the best one out of the 2. As you can see, I've got all my seeds planted in my cups. Now I can move to the next step, which is my secret ingredient, adding some mycose into it, some mycorrhizal inoculant. And like I said, my soil already has some mycorrhizal fungi in it, but this is just adding more and more strains, which is something I love to do. This isn't completely necessary, but it's something I think helps. I put it right around the seeds, so once they sprout, their roots can get inoculated immediately. And this is completely natural. All it is just mycorrhizal inoculant. So I put some on, and then I'm going to go through, cover up all my seeds, and they just need to be covered 1/4 inch. This Happy Frog is so nice for sprouting the seeds because it's so fluffy and so light. For those of you that are curious, the inoculant I'm using is from Extreme Gardening. I don't have any affiliation with them, but it's called Mycose, and it's pure, fresh, alive, organic, and it's a all natural mycorrhizal. Now that I've got these all planted, I'm going to move them into my location. And I've designed this little system here where I can keep the temperature at about between 70 and 85, just like they say, and then in 5 or 6 days I'll come back, see if any sprouted, because they should be sprouting by the 7th day. So I'll get these down here. That'll maintain the nice temperature for me, and I'll put the lid on, which will give me the high humidity. And like I said, 5 or 6 days later I'll come back and check on this, because right when I see those seeds sprouting, sometimes you can see the stem kind of curl up. Once I see them sprouting, I want to get them on the ground and in full sunlight. Because after our tomatoes start, we don't actually want them going in temperatures above 70 degrees in the beginning. If they do, they'll start to get leggy. And if they don't get enough sunlight, they'll start to get leggy. So what I do, right after they sprout or are starting to sprout, and they're perfectly germinated, I put them on the ground in the greenhouse. It's nice and cool, there's full sunlight, they stay short and stocky and strong. After my tomatoes have sprouted up and I've got them on the ground, I'll bring the fan in here to mimic the wind to help get them nice and strong. One other thing I do is after they've sprouted, I only water from the bottom. The reason for that is you don't want to have any damping off. This is when your seedlings die due to a fungal issue when the moisture is too high. So I fill up the bottom of my tray with water and let some of it wick up like that. I've got 1 tray done, and I can still fit 3 more trays in here, so I've got some work to do, but I've got to get going. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you think it's valuable, share it with your friends, and I'll see you guys in the next one. James Prigioni is out.